Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking something that is just absolutely fascinating. We're going to dive into the highly technical 2026 frameworks developed by independent researcher and CEO Clive Gerald Aldred. His work tackles two of the absolute most urgent questions of our time. First, how is artificial intelligence actually going to evolve? And second, how on earth do we hold autonomous systems cryptographically accountable when they're out there executing high-stakes transactions? We'll be exploring his multi-regime transition model and a really clever hardware layer solution he calls the Finality Gate.
Let's actually kick things off with a quote that completely shatters a really common myth. Aldred states, "The prevailing evolvable AI framework assumes substrate invariant Darwinian dynamics. We reject this." Now, what he means here is that we have this tendency to think AI will just evolve in the exact same way biological systems do, almost like a digital Darwinism. But Aldred argues that is fundamentally wrong.
Think about biological evolution for a second. It happens in this relatively homogeneous, watery, carbon-based environment, and it's driven by ambient thermal noise. But digital evolution, it is an entirely different beast. AI operates across highly complex, engineerable substrates. We're talking about bare metal server clusters, blockchain settlement layers, and vastly varying network latencies. They have entirely different thermodynamic costs and enforcement mechanisms. You simply cannot govern a blockchain-anchored AI the same way you'd govern a biological species. It just doesn't work.
So, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with 1, the digital evolution, move to 2, the 4 AI regimes, explore 3, the governance trap, examine 4, the accountability gap, break down 5, the Finality Gate Solution, and wrap up with 6, provenance over perfection.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the digital evolution. Aldred zeroes in on 4 specific physical and cryptographic parameters. Think of these as the fundamental building blocks for how any autonomous system operates. First up is compute concentration, basically how centralized is the AI's processing power. Second is interaction latency, the time it takes for an agent to actually observe and respond to an action. Third, we have cryptographic binding, which is the fraction of its actions that are irreversibly recorded on a ledger. And fourth is resource fungibility. How easily can the system's compute power be repurposed for other tasks? Literally every AI system out there sits somewhere on this spectrum.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, the 4 AI regimes.
This is where things get really interesting. When you mix and match those 4 parameters, you get distinct, stable states of AI. The crucial takeaway here is that AI isn't just one giant monolith. It falls into 4 very different regimes. You've got the Leviathan, which is highly centralized and super fast, but it's prone to what Aldred calls entropic collapse or massive hallucination cascades. Then you have the Fragmented Bazaar, which is prone to cutthroat Malachian tragedies, essentially where individual incentives lead to a terrible outcome for everyone involved. Then there's the Cortex, relying on human feedback but risking atavistic degeneracy, meaning it basically inherits and amplifies our own human flaws. But you've got to look closely at the Ghost regime. This one is genuinely terrifying. It's a metastable state. Think of highly centralized defense AIs that are only deployed intermittently. They have huge compute power but high latency and low fungibility. Because they only act in episodes, they silently accumulate internal errors. So when they finally fail, they don't degrade gracefully. They undergo a covert, total collapse right at the exact moment you deploy them.
And this structural reality brings us to Section 3, the governance trap.
See, once you understand that these 4 wildly different regimes exist, you hit a massive wall. Governing them all with just one set of rules is mathematically problematic. Aldred formalizes this trap through a theorem he calls the governance monotonicity impossibility. Basically, it proves that any regulation that just pushes one of those 4 parameters up or down cannot possibly prevent all 4 failure modes at the same time. For instance, if you force an AI to slow down, increasing its latency to stop a Leviathan-style hallucination cascade, you inadvertently push it closer to becoming a ghost regime, worsening its risk of that silent, covert collapse. There is literally no single universal lever to safely govern all AI.
So, if there's no single magic rule or monolithic regulation that can govern all AI, how on earth do we actually prevent a disaster? Especially when these systems are starting to handle real money and real binding legal contracts.
To answer that, let's zoom in. Section 4, the accountability gap.
This is the real-world micro-consequence of that governance trap when autonomous agents operate in high-stakes environments. Let's ground this dense jargon in the stark reality. Right now, the standard is post hoc assessment. Imagine an autonomous agent mistakenly executes an unauthorized $50,000 Bitcoin transaction or violates GDPR. Finding out about it later in a log file, that's an autopsy, not a cure. The money's already gone. What Aldred proposes is runtime prevention. It's the ability to cryptographically block a non-compliant action before it ever even executes.
Which brings us to the hardware layer fix, Section 5, the Finality Gate Solution. So how do we build actual verifiable trust? We do it step by step through the sealed predicate protocol, an infrastructural approach. Step 1, the proposer. The AI itself generates a reasoning trace and proposes an action. But, and this is key, it cannot act alone. Step 2 requires an attestation quorum, an independent, decentralized committee holding cryptographic keys to check that the proposal is formatted correctly. In Step 3, an adjudication engine evaluates the AI's reasoning against a sandboxed, deterministic legal rule set. Only if it passes all these cryptographic checks do we reach Step 4, where the finality gate finally opens to allow execution or firmly blocks it. The AI doesn't police itself. It is mathematically gated.
But wait, what if that committee, the attestation quorum, makes a mistake, or even colludes? Aldred solves this with something called the optimistic dispute window. Before a major transaction is permanently settled, there's a configurable challenge period. During this time, independent watchdog nodes are out there monitoring the network. If they detect that the quorum approved an illegal action, they can submit a mathematical fraud proof. If the proof is valid, the transaction is reversed and the quorum loses their stake collateral. It's cryptographically slashed. This heavily incentivizes everyone to be honest, catching fraud before an action is set in stone.
Moving on to our final big concept, Section 6, Provenance over Perfection. Okay, we really need to talk about the massive philosophical shift required to accept a system like this. The cryptographic accountability predicate guarantees provenance, but it explicitly does not guarantee semantic truth. It proves without a shadow of a doubt who asked for an action, what their reasoning was, and that it passed a formatting compliance check. It proves the AI followed the required legal steps. It does not prove that the AI has uncovered the ultimate correct truth of the universe. It solves the accountability gap, for sure, but semantic alignment? That remains an entirely separate challenge.
And naturally, this creates an inherent engineering trade-off across the whole framework, which Aldred calls the security economics bound. Think about it like this. If you want instant settlement, meaning a super short finality delay, you can only securely handle a lower value limit, like a simple retail payment. But on the flip side, if you want to secure massive, institutional-level transactions, you have to have an extended dispute window to give those watchdogs enough time to detect complex fraud. You simply cannot have arbitrarily large, instantly finalized autonomous transactions without taking on massive economic risk.
Now, to be completely fair and impartial here, this system is not magic. Aldred's source texts are very candid about its practical limitations. First, like we just talked about, there are value velocity limits. Second, the whole thing relies on economic incentives, meaning a state-level adversary who doesn't care about losing money could potentially break the model. Third is the semantic gap. Translating highly nuanced, ambiguous human laws into the strict true or false logic a computer needs, that is still a huge, unsolved last-mile problem. And finally, incredibly well-capitalized adversaries could theoretically collude to bribe the watchdog nodes. It's a remarkably robust framework, but it absolutely operates within real-world boundaries.
Which leaves us with this incredible, profound question straight from Aldred's research. Moving past the old idea of just aligning a single AI model, we really have to ask ourselves, how do we dynamically govern a system that continuously reinvents the regimes in which it operates? The transition to evolvable agentic AI is happening right now, and building the cryptographic infrastructure to actually hold it accountable might just be the defining engineering challenge of our time. I really hope this explainer gave you a powerful new framework to view what's coming next. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next one.